Oh, there we go.
All right, we're live.
Amazing.
All right, welcome to the latest Straight Up Hangout, weekly event presented by Barrel Strength Design and Pixel and Tonic. I'm Ben Prusick from Barrel Strength. Today we have with us Brandon Kelly, the writer of the topic of today, eager loading, and at Pixel and Tonic. And we have Andrew Welch from NY Studio 107 and freelancer Marion Newlevant. All right, so the topic today is a new one in Craft, came out in Craft 2.6, eager loading elements. This solves a few problems for us and gives us a lot of new power in the product. So let's see, where do we begin? Craft is a beautiful product. It has this wonderful matrix field and these wonderful relations fields, and people tend to get carried away. They can use them so easily that in no time they find that they have created queries on their pages spanning hundreds of queries into the database, several different tables, all the relational data and stuff. And depending what you're doing, this can slow down your pages, affect performance, and lead to a less than nice experience for your users, even though you had all that fun adding the content yourself. So eager loading helps us solve this problem, and I guess, Brandon, would you like to give it? So I guess it.
Well, let
I'm
me
trying to
let
get
me
into
let
the
me
N
let
plus
let
one
me.
problem, but I don't have the background to speak
Well,
comfortably.
Ben, let me jump in and just I can give a real simple explanation of the problem. So, a very typical pattern in Craft is you're looping through entries. Okay, and when you ask for a whole bunch of entries, you may have fields in those entries like an asset field or other entry fields, and these are all things that are actually relations. Whether you know it or not, a lot of the entries that you're creating actually have relations to other elements. So if you have entries that have asset fields or user fields or any number of other types of fields, these are actually relational entries. So when you're looping through these, 100 blog entries or whatever, and then you then go to look up an image for the blog, that is generating another query for that image because it's a related thing. And the problem ends up being when you do this, 100 blog entry loop, and then you ask for the image in each one, you're generating 101 queries. And a lot of people may not even realize that they are doing relational queries, but they are if they're using assets or if they're using tags or categories or any number of other things. And this is really what the eager loading is designed to help. So hopefully that framed the problem in a reasonable way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you want, I can give a little background on the feature. It's something that has literally been on our to-do list since Craft was still in beta and called Blocks, um, and just always meant to get around to it. And the way the nature of software development just kept on getting pushed back further and further. Every single release, we always start off pulling in like what the nice to haves would be that we should get in, and that's always on there, and we never quite got to it, or I guess we just never had the proper motivation. And then there was a plugin that came out that made it possible to do eager loading based on relationship fields to some degree, and I actually contributed a little bit to that and thought for a little while that would be a pretty good solution. Um, and and on top of that, some people were solving a lot of these multiple query problems with things like the preparse plugin, which kind of lets you get all the HTML that you were going to need to generate through all these relations and just generates it all when you save the entry. So the template itself is only outputting a bunch of pre-rendered HTML rather than doing all these queries on the fly. So that was working. There were enough of those types of solutions, cache tag being another really bad example, but lots of existing kind of workarounds that kind of prevented us from feeling like it was as urgent as necessary. But then recently, after Craft Commerce launched, there's a high-profile craft site that's that's in development using Commerce, and they, without going into any specifics on who it was, they had a homepage that was loading a list of products, and each of those, actually, I'm sorry, it was loading a matrix field, list of blocks, and each block within the matrix field could either be a product relation or an entry relation, depending on whether they wanted to promote an actual product or an advertisement of some sort. If it was a product, then on top of that, it was going to have to load the variant of the product to display the product's info. It was going to have to load a image as well as an alternate image for when you hover over it. And then I want to say that there were a couple other image relations as well mixed in, plus there were additional relations that would get mixed in when in the case that the block was an advertisement as opposed to a product. And so their homepage maybe showed, I want to say, like 25 matrix blocks, like not an astronomical number of matrix blocks, but that ended up leading up to, like, I want to say, like 600 queries.
I was going to ask if the SQL server caught on fire.
Yeah, I mean, it was taking 10 seconds to load the homepage, and like clearly, like wasn't something that could realistically be launched, no matter how much processing power you threw at it. There was just too many things going on.
Yep.
And so they got in touch with us, and we were looking through it and kind of running through, the usual performance improvement suggestions with them. But at the end of the day, we got it loading and just on our own and taking a look at it, and came to the conclusion that the only real solid solution here would be that we finally get around to adding eager loading support, and kind of use that site as one of our test case scenarios for building out the product. And so, I forget the exact number, but I want to say we ended up through eager loading support. We ended up dropping that homepage down from like 600 queries to somewhere around 100 or 150 or something like that. And there were other areas of the homepage that were generating their own volumes of queries that we weren't focusing on that probably could benefit as well. But significantly faster, significantly less queries, significantly lower memory consumption, all from this one feature. So we were really, really happy with it.
Nice. Yeah, we found ourselves sometimes writing a custom plugin that just did a more specific query for what we needed, or sometimes even recommending design changes of we don't want to put so many things out on this page because it'll just slow down performance sometimes. So.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's really nice is I know that people that have been around the block one or two times with Craft, like they know they develop this restraint in developing their content models. Knowing that it would just take too many queries to output. And that's one of the nice things about eager loading is it's a little liberating in the fact that now you can throw that concern out the window and just work on the content model that best suits your needs rather than worrying about the performance and the number of queries it's going to generate. So that's a really good thing.
So I think it might be helpful to talk about the opposite of eager loading, just for people that aren't aware of how Craft does it now. Currently, when you ask for entries, Craft actually lazy loads those, correct, Brandon?
Right. Yeah, if you create a Craft.entries tag somewhere, as soon as you start looping through it, or as soon as you call find on it or something like that, it's gonna run a SQL query right then and there as soon as it gets to that point in your logic.
Right.
That actually runs the query based on the parameters you define.
Right. So what that means is, I can ask for 100 entries, and there may be an image in those image fields, but it doesn't actually load that image until you actually do something to request it.
Right.
And that's what lazy.
That's kind of the nature of Twig and how our content APIs work and stuff like that. Like Twig really is a language in that, like, it's got a lexer and a parser, and it's literally parsing through your code token by token. So tag name by tag name, and within that the individual keywords you have and the dots and everything. Everything is literally like it's left to right, top to bottom, parsing your template on the fly, or at least the PHP compiled version of it. When you're loading some entries, it doesn't know at that point that you're going to be loading an image inside those entries. Like it hasn't read that far down the road yet. So
right, and also it makes complete sense. I mean, Craft doesn't know what you want to do with this data, and it doesn't. You could be dealing with potentially huge data sets, so having it preload all this stuff would probably be pretty terrible. So lazy loading is a great thing. However, there are cases where you know that in this loop of our 100 blog entries, for instance, that you're going to need this particular image.
Right.
And that's really what eager loading is meant to solve, right? It's meant to let content developers tell Craft, hey, I'm really going to need this stuff. Right?
Yeah, it's I need these 100 entries, but also I'm going to be needing these different things as well once you get to those entries. So why don't you go ahead and load it all up in advance so that when I'm ready to loop through those sub-elements, you've already queried for them, they're already ready for me, and we gave you a chance to do it in a much more efficient way than we would have otherwise. So.
Yeah, and people that are new to optimization may sort of wonder, well, what's the difference between doing one small query 100 times and one big query one time? Why does that make any kind of performance difference at all?
And we'll be looking at some examples of how these queries change today to see that.
But just from a basic overview, why is it that doing a small query 100 times is a lot slower than doing a large query once?
Well, so first of all, just from the PHP standpoint, each time you create a new query, there's new classes that need to get instantiated. So, you're creating a new element criteria model. You're setting all the parameters. Each time you set a parameter, that has its own subtle performance impact. You are, once you actually fire the element criteria model off, there's a whole bunch of logic that has to get run every single time that parses each of those parameters you set and modifies the SQL query. So it's not like it's even got the SQL query up front ready to go built and it's just firing that every time. There's a ton of logic going into just figuring out what the SQL query should be.
Mm-hmm.
And that involves instantiating a lot of PHP classes and taking up its own little memory footprint and performance footprint. And then once you get to the point where the SQL is ready to be executed, that's going through the PDO layer, which adds its own little overhead within PHP, which does a lot of things to keep the query safe and guards against a lot of potential vulnerabilities. And then it's got to take a trip to the database, to the MySQL server. MySQL's got to parse your query. It's got to reload all its indexes and find the data, and fetch it and return it. And that even if your SQL server is on the same box or the same server as the PHP is running on, there's still a communication lag there.
Right.
And it's even worse if the server's off on some other box.
Yeah, and then just a general rule of optimization is anytime you have to hit the disk, it's slow. I/O is generally a bottleneck. So just a real simple analogy that I thought of just for people that aren't familiar with this is, let's say that you have a task, and that task is to stuff and stamp 100 envelopes, right? One way you could do it is you could have your box of envelopes, and you could have your stamp sitter in a drawer, and you could have your letter that you print out, and you could print out one letter, fold it up, open up the box, get out an envelope, put the letter in the envelope, seal it, open up your drawer, get your stamp, take it out, put the stamp on, there's one, right? But that would be ridiculously inefficient because of the overhead that you're adding, right? You have to go to the box every time to get the envelope, you have to print out one document at a time, fold them one at a time, have to go in your drawer to get your stamps. What would be a lot more efficient is if I could stack up the 100 envelopes I need, print out 100 pieces of paper ahead of time, get my 100 stamps out, and when it's time to do it, just kind of nail them all through. And that's sort of analogous to what you're doing here, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially the trip to the printer and all that kind of stuff. Exactly.
All right, I'm going to shut up and let you say some smart stuff about eager loading now.
As you were saying that, my printer started making a bunch of random noises.
We're going to get to talk about eager loading as we get into the examples, and more about the queries as we get into the examples, I think. So let's speak quickly to what is now eager loadable. The announcement says relations via entries, assets, users, tags, categories, and commerce product fields are now eager loadable. Matrix blocks are now eager loadable. Commerce product variants and image transform indexes.
Mm-hmm.
And was there anything that you didn't make eager loadable that you wanted to?
Yeah. So one thing that we just realized a couple days ago is that we forgot to make entry authors eager loadable. So
yes.
if you and those are their own elements. They're not related in the sense of like a relation field, but they are related as far as the database relational sense, and definitely a candidate for eager loading that we overlooked. So we're going to get to that in the next release.
Craft 2.67951 will probably have that, right?
Whatever team's
And so then, just before we get started here, then we have all these things that are eager loadable now. A lot of our relations fields are kind of a good definition of it, or things that need to be queried as we loop through things. Is there any reason we shouldn't be eager loading in these scenarios? If we have relational content?
I guess that if you basically, there's plenty of times where it doesn't make sense. If it's a one-off query and it's not going to be repeated, and there is a small amount of overhead that is associated with eager loading. So so you have to be mindful of that. If you're just displaying a single entry with a single sub-related element like an image or something like that, there's no nested loop there. There's no loop on the top level entry. There's just one single set of sub content you need to load. So there's no opportunity to actually improve performance with eager loading there.
So in that case, you're essentially querying a second time to get the sub data and then merging it back into the primary query.
Yeah, so you have to consider with eager loading, the way it basically works is you say, okay, first you define your query of whatever the top level elements you want are. So if you're looping through 100 matrix blocks and you're going to be displaying images within each of those, your top level is the matrix blocks. So you define that query, say, here's the matrix blocks I need. And then through the with param, you're able to say, and then I'm going to need those matrix blocks with these sub-images. And when Craft is trying to figure out which images it should load, basically the first thing it does is it actually gets the matrix blocks like normal. There's nothing that changes with the actual matrix block query. But once it's loaded those, then it checks the with parameter to see if it should be eager loading anything into them. If so, then it tells matrix, the matrix element type within Craft, hey, here's a set of matrix blocks I just loaded, and the template is saying that it also wants these nested images, and so please tell me which specific images that featured image or whatever the handle is. Tell me what images that actually represents. And so matrix element type is then responsible for issuing a new query that's all it does is create a mapping of the source elements, which are the matrix blocks, and the target elements, which are the featured images or whatever you want to load beneath those. And so it runs this additional query that defines that mapping of source element to target element, returns that back, and that's just a bunch of IDs. It's just an array of IDs, basically saying, for whatever element is ID 100, it's going to also need, the sub-element 101 and 102, and so on and so forth. And then the core element service that's doing all this eager loading stuff takes that map, which took its own query to generate. It figures out all the unique elements that need to get loaded within those top level matrix blocks, and then it does its own query to get those additional elements. So basically, you're talking about 3 queries in that scenario. The first to get the matrix blocks, the second to get the mapping of matrix blocks to featured images, and then third to get the actual featured images. And then it does some processing to actually assign the right featured images to the right matrix blocks based on that map. So
this might be a good time for a question we received before the Hangout today, which was, it doesn't look like eager loading has been implemented on single entry pages. When I create a section and say this section has URLs, it gives me an entry variable, and there's no way for me to run eager loading on that entry variable. And
Yeah,
what I hear you saying here is there's no need to, because there's actually an overhead of making the query in this alternative way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point is eager loading is only beneficial when there is a set of multiple top-level elements. So if you only have one element, the entry that's being requested, for example, then there's only going to be, we're not talking about a nested loop scenario or nested query scenario. You're not going to be looping through all the different requested elements and displaying all their data. You just got one to start with. So technically, it would be possible, not from the templates, but the element service would make it possible to wrap that matched element into an array and pass it on to the element service eager load elements function. Say eager load a bunch of things onto this, but there's just all you'd be doing there is adding the overhead of eager loading without any of the benefits.
So I think the specific case was, and I think this is pretty common with Craft developers. Matrix is pretty awesome. A lot of people use the heck out of it. I think the sample use case was, I've got an entry and it's got a matrix block in it. Maybe I've got 100 blocks in there in the matrix block. And maybe in that matrix block there's an image field, for instance, right?
Well, so you can eager load things that are related to that top level entry. So you haven't lost your opportunity to eager load the things that actually would matter in eager load.
Well, I guess the question would be, since that entry, the initial query for that entry is already done by Craft because it's injecting the entry into the template.
Right.
How do I then tell it, well, I really want to load all of these matrix blocks from the field that's in that entry?
Right. So normally what you would do is you would create a for loop. You do for block in entry.myMatrixField.
Yep.
And you'd then, within that for loop, you'd be doing your additional element queries, loading the assets in or whatever it is. And that would be creating a whole bunch of queries. With eager loading, so you've already got the one entry, and then rather than directly looping on its blocks, you would do for block in entry.myMatrixField.find, and then you pass in a object to the find function with a width parameter on it. So you can you eager load the sub elements of the matrix blocks at the time you're querying the matrix blocks.
So all of the matrix blocks in the entry are already preloaded, so we don't have to worry about them?
They're not preloaded automatically, no.
Okay.
If they were, that would be a problem.
Okay.
But yeah, when Craft gets a request that it's able to match to an entry through the URL, the only thing it does is load that one entry. It doesn't try to load any of its sub-content. So it leaves the template. It leaves all the deciding what to load from there up to the template. So.
So you can decide how your page.
Matrix blocks. That's its opportunity to say, oh, and eager load these other things onto the matrix blocks as you're doing.
Right. So what you're saying is to eager load these matrix blocks and their sub things is do the find, pass in an object that says, this is what I want you to prefetch, essentially.
Right. And you wouldn't actually be eager loading the matrix blocks themselves. Those would be loaded the same way they always are, which is in one single query. The things you're eager loading are whatever related to them.
Okay, so as soon as you hit I guess the confusion was when you hit the matrix block, it's treated differently than the entries are. It's not going to do them load the blocks one at a time. It's going to load all of them as soon as you.
It will because you're querying them all at once. You're doing for block in all the blocks in this matrix field. So that's the point when the query gets run.
Right, and then if you want to go the extra mile and eager load some of the fields that are actually in the matrix block, you can pass down the object like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
So the rule of thumb here is we don't need eager loading on a single entry variable. However, if you have a matrix block or assets or heavy relational content that you decide to output on that page, you may again want to use eager loading to optimize the performance of that page.
Right.
Yeah. And speaking of optimizing performance, I think something that Brandon mentioned earlier kind of bears repeating, which is that you don't really want to go overboard with this stuff either. It's sort of like the cache tags in that you really want to make sure that you're implementing it smartly. So to go back to our example, let's say we've got 100 blog entries and there is an image field that is used for every blog entry. So that's a perfect candidate to eager load.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say we've got another image field that it's only used for the featured entry. Well, we do not want to say with featured image,
You
because
don't
that's
want
going
to
to
load
eager
that
load it. It's
Right.
going to eager load it for all the 100 entries, and we really only need it for one.
Right.
So I just wanted to kind of reiterate on that this is not something that you should just eager load everything.
Right. Yeah. Consider the scenario. Yeah. So
Right.
if you're going to be if you think it's a query that's going to be loaded multiple times or queried multiple times, executed multiple times, then yes, that's a good example. And with dev mode enabled, you can keep track of the exact number of queries that are being executed on every single page. So just keep that open, keep track of that. You can experiment a little bit, and so when I add this, does it drastically improve things or not? And if
Right.
not, then well, maybe it was more trouble than it's worth.
Yep.
Why don't we get into that? So today I prepared an example. I have a section with 500 entries with an asset on the entry, a matrix block, and a block item with an image on it. So we can step through looking at what it looks like normally, and then what happens as we start to eager load the different parts of the query.
Sounds good.
All right. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I've got a slightly modified Happy Logger site here, Brew News section, and I'm just outputting about 500 entries in the template on the index page. So right now we're just outputting the summary, the image, the highlight image, the title, and the description. And just to take a quick peek at what that looks like on the back end, here's our content. We've got a title, a feature image, and then down here we got a matrix field that just has a heading and then an image block. And every single entry kind of has the same pattern here. So there's some variation in the content, but it's more or less the same entry every single time. Okay, so just to review the code quickly over here, I'm setting an entry up here, setting our entries up here at the top, and then we're looping through them and just kind of outputting what you see on the page, and then ending our for loop. So to start off, I actually wanted to delete what's within the for loop and just take a quick peek at here's our loop. Let's reload our page and take a look at our profiler and see what's happening so far. So before we even start here, we've got 17 queries happening on the page. So that's kind of our baseline before we even start outputting content. And then if we kind of add this in stages, we could explore where are those seven, or what adds to those queries. And so I won't constantly refresh here, but if we scan through the code, we'll see that we're setting an image here, so that's adding an additional query or queries to get what it needs. We're performing an image transform. That might add some queries to our page each time through the loop. Brandon mentioned this one is the one that they haven't added support yet, but getting your author name is going to trigger additional queries here. And again, down here where we're displaying the author name in the footer, that's, again, additional queries. So just in this simple overview page, we've got 4 or 5 different elements within the loop that are adding an extra query each time we go through that loop. All right, so I've got the limit set to 500 here. I'm going to refresh, and we'll see how long this takes. Now, I'll look at the profile information here in the browser. I'm not going to copy it out as we go, but I've walked through these steps prior to this Hangout, and so at the end I'll pull up a document of a similar step through and all the performance side by side. It just won't be the exact numbers from this example. Sometimes memory and time and things vary a little from test to test. So here our page has 526 queries. All right, what do we do now? We start eager loading. All right, so the first thing we do when we eager load is we add a width parameter. And then this width parameter accepts an array of field handles that we want to eager load. So let's start with our feature image. We're going to add our feature image handle to the array. Now, it's almost that simple. I'm going to reload for kicks here and to illustrate what we get to do next.
There's actually 500 entries getting loaded here, just to confirm.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I didn't get an error. I was expecting an error. All right, so I wanted to talk about image syntax, but I'm not sure why I didn't get an error here.
Do you have Marian's plugin installed? Is that...
Do I have what? Oh, I do have her plugin installed. Is it messing it up?
Jumping the gun.
Or is that? I haven't even. I don't know what her plugin does yet. So, should I uninstall it for the moment?
Seems like a safe thing to do.
Let's do that. Sorry, folks. Rewind. Marian will be sharing something with us a little later here, but we're going to disable it for now. All right. Here's again the default install.
Unless you call
What's that?
it. It doesn't do anything unless you call it.
Okay.
Oh, no? Okay.
All right. Well, I don't know why I'm not getting an error then. So
I
I'll
don't
speak.
either.
Oh, you misspelled featured image. It's a D. That
Oh, it's featured. Okay, so it's not doing anything. There we go. Well,
live
that's the,
coding right here.
all right, so now let's reload and see what happens. Oh, and we get an error. Surprise, surprise. It's telling us...
I've never seen that page.
We all dream about this page, don't we?
Lost
we
the
get
screen
an error, and immediately we think, what did we do wrong? This is a great new feature, and I don't know how to set it up. Well, what's happening here is the way eager loading processes our images, it gives them back to us in a different format. So it no longer gives them back in a format that is an element criteria model, which allows us to call this first parameter. So we need to update our syntax in the template to use an array syntax and call the first item that we have in that array. So here we need to update our image syntax, and we'll need to do this wherever our image is wherever we're grabbing images like this in the code if there's more than one place. And then we're using a new thing in Craft and Twig called the null coalescing operator.
Yes.
It's basically doing the same thing that the first tag will do behind the scenes for us. So if the first tag doesn't find anything, it'll give us back a null. And so here, by adding our null coalescing operator and null, we're able to set our image value to null if for some reason an image doesn't exist.
Yeah, and if you didn't do that, what would happen is you get an error if nothing is returned.
Right.
Because you're trying to set it.
Saw this before.
What? No, I've helped other people diagnose problems that they've had, and I've seen it when they cause errors. I've never seen it. Go ahead.
All right, we've updated our image here. Let's try reloading again and see how our query performance improves. All right, we now have 28 queries on the page. So we dropped from over 500 to under 28. Now, queries might not be the best thing to look at as a measurement here. And I think that I'm going to pull up the examples I have from the previous test I took.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth It's the biggest number. It's kind of like the marketing problem of like focusing on the wrong number. It's really nice that we only have 28 queries from 529, and it's really easy to say this is a great improvement. But if we look at time and memory, we see a different story. We see we're dropping from around 10 seconds of our page load to around 4.5 seconds, which is more close to 50% improvement in performance. And the amount of memory required, 65K to 33K, again, in that 50% range of improvement. So it's nice that we have less queries, but it's nicer that we have 50% improvement in page load.
And that's really what we care about, right? I mean, it could do 1,000 queries, and if the page still loaded quickly and it wasn't using a ton of memory, probably no one would care.
Yeah, yeah. Great. So let's continue here. Now, the next step I wanted to take was making this a messier query. Let me see here. All right, so the next step I want to take is I'm going to undo our with tag here, get us back to our first query. I'm going to replace the image we had to the previous one. And I'm going to come down here and uncomment something else. So what I'm doing to our index page right now is I'm going to output the body of our thing too. So this isn't any longer this isn't going to be just our overview any longer. It's going to also be outputting the matrix block and the image within the second matrix block. And this is going to give us a few more examples of what we can do with when we eager load things in our templates. And I don't have performance output. All right, I'm going to just default to sharing the last examples numbers if this happens. This was happening to me a couple times while preparing this. I don't know why the performance tools weren't outputting. So in this query, we got roughly 1,600 queries now that we're outputting matrix block. And you'll see my design here is pretty crappy. I didn't spend any time outputting the design, but we're now outputting a heading of a matrix block and a thumbnail or an image from that matrix block in each of our entries. So we're loading more content each loop. And that's around 1,650. I think one of the biggest queries that I can't wait to get to next week, we have a page that has, I think, 1,800 queries on it. That's just been a ongoing struggle
Wow.
over the last year in different ways that we had to handle it. But this will be a nice way to.
So why are we not getting debugging info on this? We don't know.
Oh, this is just the normal query. Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
We can try to explain it later, but I don't think it's relevant to the topic.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's add back our width array featured image, and we need to update our image output again. And behind the scenes, well, I won't speak to that yet. Sorry, this is the exciting, suspenseful part of the presentation.
My guess as far as why nothing's getting loaded in the console is because maybe the request timed out or something. So you might not actually have the complete response in the browser.
Okay. All right, that could be it.
There you go.
All right, here we've got it back because we improved performance a bit. All right, so here we've reduced our query of 1,600 entries down to 1,052. And we've improved our time. Let's see what our time was. 23 seconds. We've got that. It's a similar amount of time that it's taking to load here. So we might have improved some things, but not everything. And so the next question is, what else can we be eager loading here? We started improving it by adding the assets, but eager loading supports additional things as well. We have to pass in every single field that we want to, or every single thing that we want to eager load. So we also want to our matrix block to eager load. So we add article body, which is our matrix field name, to the array. And I'll reload that again.
Are you going to need to make that adjustment to the code to handle the fact that it's now in an array? Or
that's what I don't think we need to do this to matrix body. So we need to do this to assets. We don't need to do it to matrix fields.
It just depends on whether you're using like an element criteria model function or not, right, when you're looking through it.
Yeah, if you're just doing a
for first, that's an element criteria function.
Okay. So when we don't add find, or if we don't add find, or we
as long as you're just looping through it, then it's going to still work either way.
Got it.
Yeah. If you're looping through an array, you're looping through an array, so it doesn't care.
All right. All right. Here we've got our results back, and here we're down to 500 queries now in 18 seconds, so we're improving things. And now we can go a step further as well, because each matrix field, if we remember, had a image in it as well. So the syntax here changes a little bit. I'm still new to this, so I gotta look up my syntax still. So we would now want to target an image field within our matrix. So we still call our article body matrix field, and we use dot syntax to target the field name within the, or the block name within the matrix that we want to target. And then we add a colon and add the image handle, the image field handle that the field handle that we want to target from there.
Yeah.
So the syntax.
To clarify this, like basically when you're dealing with a matrix block, if you were to the field handle itself is image, right? And if you were to just say article body.image, matrix isn't going to know what image field you're referring to, because there's a chance there's more than one. Because matrix settings allow you to create multiple subfields that have the same handle as long as they're in different matrix block types. So you basically just need to be a little bit more specific when eager loading a matrix subfield by specifying first the block type handle, colon, and then the actual field handle underneath that.
Okay,
yeah.
So it's matrix block field dot field name colon.
Well, block type handle colon field name.
Okay, right, gotcha.
Yeah, and what Brandon's saying is, say we had another matrix block called quote.
Right.
And that quote also had an image of the author of the quote or something in it, and we were using the same name for our image field. All right, so we don't have that field, so I'll remove that, and this is simple too. So here now we're loading everything here. Let's reload that. We're at 18 seconds and 500 queries right now.
Is this running on a local VM like Vagrant, or?
It's just a local MAMP setup.
MAMP? Okay, yeah.
All right, we're down to 12 seconds and 50 queries now. And also take note, we're outputting 500 entries and their headings and body content. There's very few scenarios where you're going to be doing something this heavy, probably.
Right.
But,
and we're also doing it in a VM, so.
Yeah, so this is we're making leaps and strides in how quickly our page is loading and how we're optimizing. Now, can we go further?
Yes.
Can we?
Yes.
How do we go further, Brandon?
Well, so you're outputting images with transforms applied to them. And each time you apply a new image transform to a new image within a request, Craft is going to need to run its own additional query to see if that image transform that you're requesting has actually been generated yet or not. Because it needs to know whether it should be, when you're calling image.getURL and passing in transform, it needs to know whether that URL should be the actual URL to the transform that's already been generated, or if it should be a transform generation URL instead that actually triggers the transform generation. So, we've added this with transforms parameter that you're adding here, and it's in a similar spirit to eager loading, but it's actually not technically the same thing as element eager loading, because you're just having the asset stuff do its own kind of form of eager loading the transform indexes. So it's similar, and it was named similarly, but it's not actually with the same eager loading system that everything else is using.
Yeah, but it falls into the same, methodology of give me this stuff ahead of time.
Exactly. You're giving Craft a heads up on which types of image transforms you're going to be using and applying to which images, and that way it's able to do kind of one big query up front for all the different index records it might have, and just get familiar with what it needs to actually generate and not once it gets down to outputting the URL.
All right, so let's take a look at the syntax of this. I've added it here, and we previously just referenced the image handle, and now we're referencing. We've updated this to be an array itself, and we have the image handle, and then a comma, and then we have another object where we pass the with transforms.
Yeah, so maybe before we dive into with transforms, it'd be easier to just explain this alternate syntax here. So basically with each thing that you're passing into the with array, you can either pass a string like that first line, or you can pass an array with two elements, the first one being a string of the thing you want to eager load, and the second being an object of criteria parameters you want to apply. And actually, the way you have it here, the way you've written this, the with transforms parameters aren't these custom criteria parameters aren't going to have any effect at all.
Good, because they didn't work in my tests. So
yeah, and the reason for that is because you've already defined that you want to eager load feature image with that first line on line 38.
Oh yeah, I was just giving an example.
Well, so I mean, but the existence of that, if you were to execute the page as it is right here, it would already have eager loaded feature image. So when it gets down to the next line saying eager load feature image, it would say, well, that's already done, and it would just move on to the next thing. It wouldn't even register that there's a custom criteria parameter set defined there.
All right.
So featured image, if we go down.
So before you leave the syntax, oh yeah, or maybe you're talking about that. Before we leave the syntax discussion, so the second object parameter could be this with transforms and the name of the transform, or it can be similar to how we would pass parameters to a transform directly. It could just be what?
No. What you're specifying in this object in this on line 41 is criteria parameters. It's only criteria parameters. So if you wanted, for example, like a simpler example would be if you skip the with transforms right now, a simpler example would be to specify kind, colon, and then the string with the value image. So basically that would be like a way of saying, like, only give me the elements that are related through my feature image
that are type image.
Actually image. Exactly.
Have really large PDFs.
Asset kind values there. And that basically, like, it's the same as if you had typed craft.assets. Kind is image or whatever. Like, any of those parameters, that's where you define them if you need it. So with transforms is just another asset criteria parameter. So it goes right alongside anything else you have there.
Okay.
So exactly. And so with transforms is an array, and then that can contain multiple different transform definitions, whether that's a string defining the handle of a transform you've created in the control panel, or you could put an entire object in there that defines the width and height and whatever else you need. And you can just have as many of those things as you need.
So you say,
and I think so. So if you look down to line,
so if I'm understanding this correctly, we have the documentation page for assets right here, and we have kind as an example of something we can pass to assets.
right.
And so there is another parameter that I don't see on this page yet.
Probably need to update this.
With transforms.
Yeah, we just need to update the documentation.
Okay, so we'll see that here in the future, but it could be updated. It can and used just like you see image being used here on the asset tag as well. All right, so let's run this and see what happens. Now, this one I actually didn't see much change in performance from when I tested this, so I didn't know if I was doing something wrong with the syntax or if it just wasn't that big of a change.
Well, so I think that the problem here is the example data. Consider that you're only adding a query per unique pair of assets and transform.
Mm-hmm.
But on this page, you've actually got you're cycling through the same 4 or 5 assets.
Yeah, it's just randomly through.
So if each one of these entries had their own unique assets, then it would make a big impact, and that would be much more reflective of a realistic scenario there, where you're not using the exact same image for every single entry. You're creating new images for every entry.
Got it.
But yeah, so this feature only this particular with transforms property is only going to have an effect when you have unique combinations of images and transforms that need to get loaded. So
let me.
The second time it's showing the thumbnail of an image that it's already shown the thumbnail for, it already remembers whether or not it has the transform generated yet or not. So.
Okay.
So let me ask a syntax question. So let's say we're already preloading our matrix blocks, and we're preloading the image field from those matrix blocks. What if we wanted to preload transformed images from inside the image field in our matrix blocks that we're preloading?
Mm-hmm.
How would that look syntactically?
Well, so I think we've already got an example queued up for us in this template Ben's working on.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm just going to shut up and let them go. I'm sorry.
If you go,
So,
then if you look back, so we're also displaying these article body images, right? So
Yeah,
basically,
so
if you take that last line, if you take line 44 and
okay.
turn that into an array, and then create that and add a with transforms thing, and then let's go to the article body template.
How do we keep it on your screen sharing? There we go. Yeah.
If we go back to the article body template, we can take a look and see which transforms we're actually loading.
Here we're actually passing in direct variables to these transforms.
Yeah, and it looks like there's multiple options. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to just pass each one of those into the with transforms array. There's not actually a significant amount of overhead here. The with transform parameter does not actually generate any transforms if they don't exist. It's simply getting a record of what does exist and what doesn't exist at this point. So you don't really have to worry too much about the fact that some transforms might be applied to certain images and some might not.
Right. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to see what it would look like syntactically, because I think there are a lot of people that use matrix blocks for a ton of stuff, and it would be interesting to see syntactically what it looked like loading transforms from a eager loaded image field from a eager loaded matrix block.
Right. So that's what we're doing right now. So
correct me if I'm doing this wrong. are we saying we pass in things in this way?
No, you would be passing those into the with transforms array. So
with
if you take a look at the line above where thumb is actually defined within an array,
got it.
an array just starts gaining multiple elements.
And we don't need. Would these be objects or?
You've got it just right now. This is correct.
And take a look at the questions real quick. Eric is pointing out that there might potentially be a typo in our template.
Featured image. Okay, me misspelling again. Featured image. Thank you, Eric. Keep us honest. All right. So now we have article body. We know there's 4 different transforms. It doesn't matter what order they're in or when they happen. We're just pre-calling them so they're available when we're trying to output them, and that should help us out.
That's the theory.
Well, I know if I spell all the variable names wrong, I don't get errors on the page, so nobody knows what happened. All right, we're again 10 seconds down to, so I think that's a little bit improvement. 10 seconds time page load, 48 queries on the page.
Yeah, and again, it's not a drastic difference in this example simply because we're reusing the same images so many times.
Great.
So this is another in real world scenarios. This is another n+1 problem where every single entry has its own unique images and really does. You could have easily had an extra 500 or 1,000 queries here to start with if you had all unique images. So. Bringing it back down to 48. The nice thing to know is that 48 is a constant. Like that would remain the same number of queries no matter how many additional images you have here.
Great.
So we're kind of creating. This is like the new number of queries this page takes to load, regardless of how many additional entries you want to add or how many additional images you want to load onto those entries or anything like that.
Great.
So. We've basically solved the n+1 problems within these this area, or most of it. There's still the author problem, which if you had a bunch of unique authors, then you're going to be driving up the query count. So we need to solve that still, the ability to eager load the author. But yeah, I mean at this point. We could take a look. There's there's other image transforms that are actually getting loaded, or there's relations that that we could maybe optimize. But 48 is clearly far lower than 500. So that's the important thing to note here is that we definitely no longer have like an n+1 problem on the page.
All right, so here's our results from the previous test I did. So similar results to what we just went through, just to summarize. We started with just a summary being output, 500 entries with a single feature image. We went from 10 seconds and 500 queries down to 4.5 seconds and 28 queries. And then here we added our body content being output. And we started at 20, so that added an extra image and matrix blocks and image within it. We started at 23 seconds and 1,600 queries, and we got down to 10 seconds and 48 queries throughout that. And this kind of goes through each step of the way, the improvements when we just did the feature image, when we did feature image and article body, when we did all the way down to our matrix asset fields. And then with transforms, which we just did. So pretty impressive, pretty impressive. So one other question, what happens when we use the cache tag? Can we improve this even farther? I think the thing to note here is
well, the answer to that
eager loading is helping with our page load. The cache tag is helping with our secondary page load.
Right. I mean, so I think like philosophically, don't think of the cache tag as a performance enhancer. That's not what it's there for. Caching in general is something that should be used to help you with scale, not with performance. So if your page is taking forever to load, and you're thinking, oh, we'll just wrap it in a big cache tag, and 99.9% of the visitors are gonna get this nice cached, quickly loading page. That's the wrong answer, because you've still got to factor in the one guy that has to hit the page up and wait 10 seconds or whatever it takes to load in the first place. So we don't recommend ever using the cache tag in a way that just to improve performance of a page. And it's kind of been an annoying thing to say, because we've never really had like a great alternative solution to point to. Like, well, don't use cache, but do this instead. Now we finally have that. Don't use cache, use eager loading instead. Or if you're going to use cache, then do something like use the pre-parse field and actually cache things on the entries as you're saving the entries, so there's never a really long load time on the template end of things. But that's probably for a whole other hangout.
Yeah, and we do have a separate hangout on the cache tag going into that. So good words of advice by Brandon. This isn't a performance improvement. I did, just for comparison, put both the lazy load and the eager load examples here in the cache tag, just to compare them, and we see that they pretty much result in the same cache performance if you're using the cache tag. So the cache tag isn't helping anything with the initial page load at all, but after the fact, it doesn't matter which one you're using, cache tag's going to behave just the same.
Right. I'm interested. I guess the 12 queries, the additional 2 are just cache-related queries. So when you're using the cache tag, that does add its own query just to see if a cache exists for the.
Yeah. And then this was a secondary. I guess this could be the eager. I don't know what. Anyway, sometimes you get slight variations for whatever reason.
It also depends on whether you wrapped the eager loading stuff within the cache tag or not. If those are outside the cache tag, then and if you're calling find on the craft.entries tag, or whatever it is, then yeah, that's not going to be hidden away with the cache tag in place.
Great. All right. So I think next up, shall we ask Marion to share with or share a little bit about. So Marion saw this great new feature and was like, I can make it even better, and has already released a plugin that enhances eager loading. So Marion, would you like to tell us about your plugin MN Eager?
Sure. Why don't you go on sharing your screen, and I'll talk you through using it.
Okay.
You've got it, and you might as well install it.
Yes, I uninstalled it there. Chrome DevTools seem to log me out all the time right now. I don't know why. All right, we've got it installed, and we'll pull up our page template again. And
it probably has to do with the fact that you're loading it with the responsive view, by the way.
Okay, yeah, I haven't had a chance to look into it. I just know every time I toggle back to Craft right now, I'm logged out, and
it's because you're using the responsive view, which means that Chrome's actually sending a different user agent on the front.
So I need to switch back to the user agent it thinks I'm logged in as.
Yeah.
All right, Marion, MN Eager.
All right. Well, why don't you go and look at the source for the plugin. It has all of 2 files.
We talked about plugin development last week and how simple they can be. So.
Ben, is there a way for you to lock the screen on your screen?
It is locked for me on it, so I believe the recording will be showing my screen the whole time. So okay. I have been trying to do that as we've been sharing code. I just need to remember to undo it as people talk.
If Michael would just be quiet, it would never switch. I mean.
Welcome, Michael.
Nice to see you guys. And yeah.
All right, Marion, guide me.
Okay. Well, look in your plugins at the MN Eager plugin. You may be sharing your screen, but I'm seeing an older version.
You can click on his thumbnail.
You can select my screen if you want. In the bottom right, you can click on the...
Yeah, I think I did. Okay. So there, under variables, there's the variable, MN Eager variable.
All right.
And there it is. It's got two variables, and what they do, the find one is possibly useful, but the first one is definitely useful.
All right.
And so what it does is you pass it in something, and it says, is it an array? And if so, then it must have been eager loaded, and it just returns the first one. And if it's not an array, then it should be, you know, an element criteria model, and it calls first on it and returns that. So that's the logic of it all. There's not a lot of overhead in calling it. And the way you call it, if you want to go back to your template,
all right,
is there where you have those two things commented in and out. You can now add a third one where you say...
We're talking about the image here?
Exactly there. Let's add a third option.
All right.
Set image equal craft.mneager.first, pass it newsentry.featuredImage.
All right.
And then you can just use that one, assuming you've got the MN Eager Pro plugin there, whether or not the thing is being eagerly loaded. So as you go tweaking with your or also, you have that right there in line, so the template kind of basically knows whether or not it's been eager loaded. But if it was in some macro or something.
Yeah, so I think that's a good thing to emphasize here. This could be important because if we have a larger site and we start to componentize the elements on the site, and we have an article section and a blog section and a category, and they all use the same matrix block template, if we're eager loading one of them and we're not eager loading another one, we might have a problem because the asset output syntax might need to be the first format here for the one section, and it might need to be this array syntax for the other. So this type of syntax would help us avoid needing to worry about if we eager loaded all of the content or didn't eager load all the content. It would just sort it out for us.
Yes, that's exactly the use case.
Cool.
It's only a little bit longer than the other two, but
yeah. But it's otherwise you'd need some amount of Twig code doing something similar to this.
I think you could do isArray inside the Twig code, but
yeah,
it seemed like way more hassle.
All right, very cool.
I guess as far as like the verbosity of it is concerned, it'd be interesting to see this altered to support a custom Twig filter, which would allow you to just do something like newsentry.featuredImage and then pipe and then MN Eager first or something like that, rather than passing the thing into your variable, just have a exactly something like that. Like, it's not going to work right now because the code isn't hooked up, but you could have like a custom Twig extension that makes that possible.
Yeah, and we did discuss, if you're interested in plugin development, we discussed this specifically last week a little bit in how to tools for getting started with plugin development, how sometimes you might want a variable, other times you might want a filter or function in Twig to shorten the syntax.
Yeah. Twig does have a first filter, which kind of does what we're talking about, but I guess that the downside to using it is that if you have passed an element criteria model into it, what it's going to do is it's actually going to cause Craft to load the entire batch of elements, not just the first one, and then it will just return the first of those results.
It's probably not what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And so the nice thing about this plugin is it's actually factoring in if it's an element criteria model. If so, it's calling its first function, which does limit the query to 1. So
curiously, if you're in an element criteria model and you call first, doesn't that end up generating the entire list?
no, it'll just get the first one. It sets the limit to 1, and then it loads the results and returns the first result if there is one. Otherwise, it returns null.
Is that why it's named first?
That is exactly why there is an actual function for it, as opposed to just having to use the twig filter.
Oh, right, because first calls nth. First
Yes,
is just
internally
a
first calls
shortcut
nth.
for nth of 0, and nth
Exactly.
sets the limit to 1.
Right.
Very
Hey,
clever.
Michael, can you put your camera on? Brandon said he wanted to be able to see your face-to-face for this.
So we hear Michael has a question.
Hello, Brandon. What's my question?
Oh, well,
Andrew and I were thinking it'd be good for you to bring up your use case for the as parameter.
Yeah, so let me...
This is getting into potential future features for eager loading.
Yeah, all right. Basically, what's really nice about eager loading is that it'll pull back all of the items that would be another element criteria model query, in one fell swoop with whatever the original thing is that generates the source elements. But I had a use case where I actually, so I've got a list of volunteer shifts for an event, and then related to those different events are reports that people can put in. And a report has a status of it is either in progress or it is complete. And so one of the things that I'm doing on a dashboard is listing out all of these different events, and then for each one of them, I want to see if it has a report that is in progress and if it has a report that is complete. And so it would be, and do things like counting them and stuff. And so it would be cool if I could eager load 2 different queries with 2 sets of parameters, all in one fell swoop using like an as keyword. So I'm trying to pull up some code here so that I can type it out. Where is it? But yeah, basically, I like that you can, in the width parameter, you can specify other attributes for the eager loading query. It would be cool if you could do more than one of those.
Yeah, so basically eager load multiple sets of elements based on the same relational field. So if you had an assets field that is relating both images and PDFs, and you wanted to be able to have 2 different eager loaded sets of elements, one of all the images and one of all the PDFs, all from the same assets field, without having to go and loop through your array of eager loaded elements and doing all that processing post query. It'd be nice to be able to say, give me these entries with this assets field with the parameters, type : image or kind : image as eager loaded images.
Exactly.
Also give me my assets field with parameters kind : PDF as eager loaded PDFs, whatever you want to call it.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I think that's a really interesting potential feature idea. We were playing around with. I was playing around with like ideas of how exactly the syntax would look on that. Considering we're not like defining our own tag here with this width parameter. It's these are just regular old twig expressions.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking maybe the place to do it would be just in that string. Before you've defined any custom parameters or anything, you just define either do something like with, and then in one of the strings you say, my assets field, and then space, as, space, and then whatever you want to call it, all within that same string. And then we just do some parsing on the string itself. I don't know if you want to be like, showing what this potential syntax would look like, but
yeah. Let's see.
If you were to put a space after the letter D in assets field here.
So let's see here. Oh yeah. Where is
The space bar is the big button in front of you, in the middle.
Oh yeah, thanks so much.
You got it.
Sometimes I have problems technologizing. Okay, but like for example, so in this case, I'm pulling all of the list of my shifts. That's not too important. But then for each one, I'm coming in and setting, okay, started reports is, anything from my shift report section related to this shift, and a completed report is anything from the shift report section related to the shift that has a status of complete. And I'm getting those two counts separately. And so it would be cool if, I'm going to jump in here, if I pull, let's see, set shifts is all of this business with, and then I say shift reports, and then I'll, I have an empty query, and then maybe as like a third
Yeah, that would be another option.
parameter, and I say this is the started reports, and then I can come in and add it again and say pull all the shift reports. But this time I want to call it completed reports, and it's status is complete.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then
that was the other thing I was thinking. So basically, you don't have the actual word "as" anywhere. It's just kind of known that if you're going to add a third parameter, then that's actually overriding what the eager loaded elements are going to be referred to as within the.
right.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea.
Because then, in this theoretical example, then if I go and I pull shift.started reports, that's going to give me an array. And
Right.
if I pull
Shift reports.
shift.shift,
That doesn't actually get
Reports.
overridden in this.
then that's going to give me an ECM like normal. And so that would be really cool. There's a lot of cases like in this particular case, this is kind of hacky. I could be doing this much more elegantly, but like your example is better when you were talking about like I have a single assets field and I want to list out the assets or the PDFs and the images separately. Like that's a better example.
So, I mean, for what it's worth, Brendan, at least to me, from a syntax point of view, the "as" seems a little more clear to me, rather than just, well, if you pass in this magical third parameter, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, and I guess my problem with the third parameter option is that now you're required to set this second parameter of what the custom parameters are, even if there aren't any. So in this, the first line
That's
you
true.
have just kind of looks awkward to me. Like, if all you want to do is customize the name.
Yeah, and there are other places in Craft where you use that kind of syntax. Give me this as whatever. For
There.
instance, mentioned it before, the paginate tag.
Oh
which-
yeah.
And again, that's a scenario where like the as parameters is actually part of Twig's language. We've extended Twig to give it the concept of that as parameter. But yeah, exactly as you've done here right there with that as just in the string, and that's something we could just parse out at runtime. Just search to see if if the thing ends with space as space and then some new handle.
Yeah, I mean, I get the only other option that I could think of would be like to come in here and add it as a parameter on the element criteria model. But
Not an idea either.
but like I'm not. Maybe I have a field called as. I mean, that would have to become
exactly.
a reserved. It would have to become a reserved word.
You're muddying the definition of like what that object was
Yeah,
to do.
and that's the other thing is the as attribute has no meaning to an ordinary element criteria model. Like it only has meaning if I'm in the context of eager loading, and so like passing it as a parameter.
I guess
the
that
element criteria
just
model.
be an array, and maybe if you're going to override the name, you put that as like you could either do that as a second or a third element on the array. So basically like the object where you're defining custom criteria parameters becomes optional, and you don't actually have to set it if you want to get to that alias.
That's the idea. I mean, the more I'm looking at it, I don't mind this syntax. It sort of, I guess it limits what you could do in the future, like with this string value, like how many. If there's something else you want to tack onto the string value later, I can't think of anything, but it doesn't bother me. I mean, MySQL has, like, if I'm writing a MySQL query, this is like that's the syntax. Select this as this. So I don't mind that.
So, anyways.
So we do have a question from Christian. Did you want to take it, Ben? Or
hey, go for it. You're on top of this.
Well, I was trying to get you to pronounce his last name properly, but
this is Carl. On
Christian Seelbach has a question. It says the elements that I'm querying for my element criteria model are the target elements of a relation. Can I use eager loading to get the source elements?
Yeah, so reverse relations is another example of something that's not really eager loadable at this point. So my answer to that is to use the existing eager loading plugin. I am totally drawing a blank. What the plugin name is called? Let's see if I can find it.
You talking about Fetch?
Fetch, yes, Fetch. Yes, it's by Mike Pepper, I want to say. Yeah, so there's a plugin called Fetch, and that has been the solution to a lot of eager loading scenarios for a while. And that does support eager loading reverse relations. So it's kind of helps in this scenario. I guess that the problem is it's not going to help if the thing that you need to eager load relations from is itself being eager loaded from something else. So in that scenario, it gets a little more difficult because you don't actually have the target or the source element yet. So anyways, that's eager loading reverse relations is another thing that we're trying to figure out if there's a really simple way for us to define that or how we would get that hooked up. At this time, the only actual way to do it without any caveats would be to write your own custom field that doesn't actually get a UI or anything. It's like its sole purpose is to help out with eager loading these reverse relations on a case-by-case basis. So I don't want to go into details on how that would work, but it would definitely be possible to do with a custom field that was specifically for this one thing.
I cannot find this plugin anywhere on StraightUp Craft or craftplug.in. Where do I find it?
So let's see.
I googled Fetch Craft CMS plugin, and I'm coming up blank.
Okay. It's github.com/mdcpepper/fetch.
Is there a thing that we can post in?
According to the README, it's now deprecated, but and it's not going to be maintained anymore, so probably shouldn't be recommending people use it, and that's probably why it's not on StraightUp Craft. But it does still have that one nice little advantage that you can't actually do natively. So
Let me see if I can ask a question to get that to appear. No, I can't. All right.
We will have better plugin search on Straight Up Craft.
It's probably just not even on
It's
CertCraft.
probably not on it. Yeah.
Bold. But yeah,
No,
So
I was going to try and get it to appear as a question in our Hangout.
oh yeah,
the
you have
actual URL.
Oh yeah, I don't know how to do that.
that's
Me
right.
either.
Well,
Okay.
so I have another direction here, and I understand we're at an hour and a half now. So if anybody needs to leave, just speak up. I think there's another side of eager loading, if we can at least give it lip service, is the PHP side of things. So we may want to do this in our plugin. We might want to add support in our plugins, or we might just need to run a query on the other side of the fence, not in Twig. So first, I just wanted to confirm syntax. I share my screen again. And I haven't written this or tested this, so this is me attempting to take what we were doing on the front end and turn it into an element criteria query, just to confirm this is the syntax we want.
You could do it that way,
That's a mess.
or if you let's say there's one thing you can do in PHP that you can't do in templates right now, which is, let's say you already have an array of elements. It doesn't even matter if you got it from the element criteria model or what. Let's say you already have the array of elements. So same example, just remove the width parameter there.
Remove this.
Yeah, and set elements equals criteria.find.
Elements. Okay.
Just so you actually have an array of elements. So let's say you have this array of elements and you fetched them without the width parameter. You just now that you have them, you realize you want to eager load something onto them. In that case, what you can do is you can call craft arrow elements arrow eager load elements, camel case, yep, and then pass in elements, comma, and then an array of whatever you would have set the width parameter to.
Okay.
So if you set that
So
to
featured.
image, for example. Actually, if you look behind the scenes, when you set the width parameter, as I said earlier, that actually has no effect on the initial query whatsoever. It's not until after the elements have been fetched that the element service then checks to see if the width parameter was set, and if so, it calls this.eagerload elements and it passes in the results and whatever the width parameter was set to. So this is actually doing exactly the same thing, both of these examples. But it's nice to know that it's possible for you to just call eagerload elements on the element service whenever you want, independently of an element query if you need to.
Okay, great. All right, and then in the case of, we have a element or a field that we feel needs some love with eager loading, when should we be considering to add this to our plugins, and how complicated is it to do so?
So yeah, I mean, if you have a custom field that is a relational field that extends the base element field type, you actually have eager loading built in already for free. So the base element field type already does that for you. If you have a relational field of any sort that does not extend base element field type, then it's basically a matter of implementing a eager loadable field type interface or something like that. I forget the exact name, which requires you to add
eager loading field type interface.
There you go. Eager loading field type. Basically that requires you to add a new get eager loading map function to your field type, and that takes an array of elements that have already been loaded, and then it's expecting you to just figure out what to eager load on top of that. So if you've got an element type, then you don't have to implement a new interface or anything, but you just add that get eager loading map function, and through that you can add support for whatever custom uh, things you want. So there's no, I can't think, like the only built-in examples of this are you could look at the base element field type class if you want to see how that's doing its thing. Other than that, there's no real simple examples in the core code base of eager loading. I guess the best place to look would be Commerce, which is a free download on craftcommerce.com. If you took a look at its variants element type or products element type, those are pretty good examples of how you might support eager loading in a new element type example.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. I was actually going through the Craft Commerce source code the other night. Don't ask, but I was going through the source code and I saw a number of places where it is implementing the eager loading element, and so that makes complete sense from the example that you mentioned earlier, where you had a use case for this for a commerce site that was having speed issues. Where I kind of wanted to take this was, are there other so Craft Commerce, the new version 1.1, I believe it is, immediately benefits from eager loading elements. Are there other places in Craft, like in the backend, that are also have been refactored to take advantage of eager loading elements without us having to do anything?
No, not yet. We're actually, I mentioned that we need to add support for eager loading authors, and when we do that, I also want to see if there's an opportunity for us to add eager loading support to the backend. So let's say you're viewing an entry index and you've got a column for showing the author of the entry. It'd be pretty cool if, like, even there, like, we could eager load those authors so that it's not running. There are N+1 problems whenever you have an author field or a relational field being displayed on an element index. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
We would like to speed that up through eager loading as well. Just haven't gotten around to looking into how we might hook that up yet.
Yeah, so things like an asset index, for instance, or any of those things could in theory do that. Yeah.
Right. In theory. Yeah. I mean,
especially on heavily customized element indexes, where people have a bunch of asset fields or something in their indexes, and you already know which fields those are. So that would be cool.
And even potentially matrix block. If I'm editing a huge matrix block that has an image field in it, does it make sense there too? I mean,
that's something to consider. We should actually think about that when we're doing this stuff. Yeah. Lots of options. But
I thought I was teeing it up for you to say, yes, we did that already.
We haven't been exclusively focusing on front-end performance so far, but there's numerous places in the control panel where it would benefit if we figured out a way to hook it up. So.
However, it does look like Craft Commerce immediately benefits from it, so you should be seeing some nice speed increases, at least with some of that stuff, right?
Well, there's nothing immediate. Like you'd have to use the width parameter.
Okay.
So there's nothing. There's not a single place anywhere in Craft, CMS, or Commerce that's eager loading right now without you typing anything. Like you have to always explicitly eager load it.
Huh. Well, yeah, it was late at night when I was going through that source code, so
yeah.
I guess I misunderstood what was going on there. But it looked like it was explicitly calling eager load element in some places.
Well, yeah, I forget. I don't think so.
Okay.
I could be wrong. It might be that we changed things, and maybe when you load in products where you're loading their variants right off the bat, or vice versa, something like that. Like in some case where like we know there's a 99% chance if you've got a variant, you're going to also want its product. So there's definitely places where it might make sense to just assume an eager load regardless of whether you specified it, but I don't think we're doing it yet. I think that right now we're leaving it up to you, the template developer, to specify it. So.
All right, I'm gonna go back and look at what I saw again. Maybe it was just. We'll see. Who knows? Get Luke on here and grill him.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think we've got a little more to think about as far as eager loading goes. So. Any
Cool.
final questions?
I'm good.
All right.
I appreciate Brandon coming on and setting us straight on a few things here.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming out. Next week we'll be discussing optimizing templates and dry templating techniques, and we'll see you then. Have a great day.
Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Good weekend, everyone. Bye.